Now, the problem is the system is not set up for complicated cases. 15 minutes in a doctor's office, it's cookie cutter medicine. So all along the way, you've got these systems that aren't capable of looking at complicated cases.
Welcome to Bitch Talk. I'm your host, Erin.
And I'm co-host Ange, aka Captain Party.
And for more than 11 years, the show has celebrated underrepresented voices in pop culture and beyond.
But not in the snore kind of way, which is why our listeners and followers have graciously voted us Best of the Bay, Best Podcast on 48 Hills for 3 years in a row. Three-peat, bitches.
If you like what you hear, follow us on Instagram and check out our website, Bitch Talk Podcast, and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're begging you to judge us. When does that ever happen? Oh, you're not going to say anything?
What would I say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, on with the show. Clink. Okay, we are still here at Slamdance 2025, and our next two films are both documentaries. The first one is Larry, They, Them, and the second one is Complicated. Enjoy. Okay, Bitch Talk, it is Slamdance 2025, one of our favorite festivals of the year. And right now we are going to talk about a documentary called Larry, They/Them. We're sitting here with the director, Catherine Legault. Thank you for being on Bitch Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Catherine, our audience has not seen the film yet, so can you introduce them to Larry, They/Them?
Yes, the film is about Laurence Philomène, a non-binary trans photographer. And I follow their artistic process as they put together their book, Puberty, which is self-portrait photos of themselves as they're going through their hormonal treatment therapy. So we get to learn about Laurence. Also, it opens up on their close circles of friends, their parents, and also different like LGBTQ plus issues and, you know, the context, political context in Quebec, Canada specifically. And yeah.
I read that you, in the press notes, I read that you had met Laurence earlier on a previous film and then worked with them, hiring them, doing some photography for you. So can you talk about building that relationship with Laurence and when you maybe approached them to do this documentary or project?
Yes, I've known Laurence for about 10 years now. As you mentioned, they are in my first film. They are in the opening scene. They're the photographer taking photographies of the main subject, and their photo became the poster of the film. So we've worked together before, and I knew them as a person and as a creative photographer. But then I kept following them on social media, and on Instagram, they started posting photo reels in which they shared like very intimate self-portraiture photos of themselves, like having breakfast in bed or prepping for their tea shot. And those photos were really beautiful, but also very powerful. I thought that, like, knowing Laurence and how articulate they are, that the combination of their beautiful, very colorful work with their transition, so that's how they came out, and that's how I learned about their hormonal transition therapy. It's on the Instagram. So I contacted them and thought it would be a great subject for my next film.
Yes, you are definitely right. And when you're shooting a documentary, because you're not working with actors, you're working with real people, you always worry, like, are they going to be comfortable on camera? Are they going to be able to express themselves? But I feel like with Larry or Laurence, you really hit the jackpot because they're already very open and vulnerable in their photography. But did you find a difference in, or was it more complicated to get them to open up in a video sense with their words because they're so used to opening up just in a visual medium?
It was not, and it was really pleasing as a filmmaker to film them because they're really used to being in front of a camera. So there was not this awkwardness or, you know, the camera shy moments. They were just very authentic and natural, and they understood the process as well. The challenge was more like I couldn't film with them for more than 4 or 5 hours a day because otherwise they would become self-conscious. So I was very careful with that. But besides that, like they were really open and we had a lot of conversations from the get-go, very transparent conversations about like what the film was going to be about and what I wanted to go for. And I was asking like really open questions and very intimate questions for my knowledge, but also for the purpose of the film. So there were like two dialogues going on, like everything that I was asking was not necessarily for the film, but it was to understand their journey and the process and just to be clear with one another of what we were going for. And I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable also being filmed because it's a different thing being by oneself, you know, in one's apartment and making self-portraiture, some of which is has nudity. So it's showing them in a very vulnerable position. And also like all of the production conditions, like who was filming, who was there during those scenes. And I wanted the film to have its own style and its own look, but still inspire itself from Laurence's work. So it was always like finding that balance of like being really close to the subject and embracing their aesthetic and their style, but at the same time bringing this new twist and new perspective and opening up also to a diversity of people and show that being a gender non-conforming people, there are different ways of being, you know, non-binary. Not everybody follows like a hormonal replacement therapy, and they all have like their personal journey. So this is really like Laurence's story, but also I want to show that there's a diversity of people.
And Catherine, you're able to talk to at length, really, a couple of people that are very close to Laurence, including their partner Nina. And I wanted to know really how much of that did you have to edit out? And did they have any say in it? Or were they very free with their time and their words?
Any edit out, you mean of Nina or the parents or?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think they're all like so interesting. Nina is great. I think they are really like engaged and political, and also like they talk about Laurence's work in a very different way because they're more of a private person. So I thought that was really interesting. And also they worked on the animation in the film. Mm-hmm. So bringing their perspective creatively. So it was interesting to have their take on that. And I think they really enjoyed the process. And so having like their queer perspective, but also like they are non-binary, but they don't have, like they don't follow a hormonal treatment like Laurence does. So I thought also it was interesting to show that. As for the parents, they were really going through like emotional moment, and I think it's great that they accepted being part of the film because even though there is tension between them and Laurence, there is still support and love, and I thought it was super important to show that. And there is like an open dialogue. So I think like the film and the book, like Laurence's book and then the film process really helped them understand better about their child and about their transition and be able to talk about it in a more like comfortable, like being more comfortable with the idea of that, and they're still working on it. But I think the film process was very good for them, and it strengthened the relationship of Laurence and their parents altogether. I know it can be a scene that a lot of people connect, which is great. And also it can be triggering to other people. But when we had like focus group screening, it became clear that it was important, and it was really heartfelt and touching. And so I'm grateful that they accepted to participate.
Yeah, what I really love about your film is it really portrays that it is about the journey, not the destination. It's not about these really big moments, really big, important. It's about the everyday slice of life moments that makes Larry's story so beautiful and so relatable. Can you talk about making a film, but not necessarily making a film about all these big moments, making a film about everyday moments and what makes them so special and unique? Because it's harder to plan those, right?
Yes. Well, I think it was already in Laurence's work. And so their everyday life, the very mundane things about their day. And so I wanted the film to reflect that. At the same time, like the film is observational. So I had interviews with them, and a lot of times I was just, filming quietly and just letting them, go about their day. And sometimes, like at first, the sound recordist was like asking me questions like, so are you sure that's all we're filming? Like we're good? It was like, yeah, that's fine. That's all we need for today. And, but what we ended up doing is like filming slices of life, like really short afternoons or mornings here and there, and to really portray who they are as a person. And I think it really helped to just to capture their personality, but also their artistic process.
I know we have to wrap soon. I had two questions, or I have a question and a comment. First of all, I wish Larry was here because their nail game is so on point. Every time, because I also am obsessed with nails and get my nails done probably too often. But I just love their nail game. So please let them know, like I see them. And also,
I will.
but could you kind of just answer this question, but I was thinking about, I know you've worked with Laurence for a really long time, but during this process of filming them, did you learn anything new about their artistic process and what surprised you?
Yes, I mean they're so casual about what
Yes.
they're doing. And like every time I was filming, I was asking them to make a self-portrait. And, I wouldn't direct them. Like I would just let them decide whatever they wanted to document that day. And every time I was like impressed of just like how easy it looked from the outside, and also their apartment was not big. And, after photographing yourself for like 2 years in the same space, like you run out of ideas, right? But they were always like coming up with new little things, and it was like simple stuff, but then it becomes so meaningful when you look back, in the context. And like the film also really wanted to humanize Laurence and their close ones, and just show that, non-conforming gender people, trans people, or just normal people. And what they talk about during dinner is not always about like gender identity or, the issue of the day. Like sometimes it's just about like their everyday life, or, what they cook that day. So I wanted the film to show that as well, just like have their personality come across.
Well, mission accomplished, Catherine. It really is a film that's full of joy and beauty. And I'm going to use a phrase that I learned in this film, gender euphoria, which is
Yes.
A beautiful term that I learned. So thank you for that. Laurence has also inspired me to kind of want to pose nude for some photos. Not for anyone else,
wow.
just for myself. What about you, Erin?
Not yet. I'm not there.
Well, not like but just the casualness of it. That's a good word. It's just like, wow, that looks really freeing and beautiful. And I don't know. I think it's very empowering. So thank you so much, Catherine. The film was so beautiful. We've been talking about Larry, They, Them, which is screening at Slamdance 2025. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are here at Slamdance 2025 to discuss a feature documentary. It's called Complicated. And we're sitting down with the director, Andrew Abrahams. Welcome to Bitch Talk.
Great to be here.
Okay, Andrew, our audience hasn't seen the film yet, so can you introduce them to Complicated?
Well, it's a complicated film. um, Complicated is about young people with complex and invisible illness um, who are falling through the cracks of the medical system. And we're focusing on one specific um, condition. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it affects the collagen and the connective tissue in the body, which is everywhere. So it affects all different parts of the body, all different systems, and there's many different symptoms. And so when it arises, usually around puberty, parents don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, there's all these problems. They take them to doctor after doctor. The kids often get labeled as psychological, that there's something wrong with them. They're just want to get out of school, that kind of thing. And then their parents who are desperately trying to help, and usually it's the mother, because the mother's the one who's usually involved in this way, um, comes under scrutiny herself and under suspicion for what they call medical child abuse. That they think that they're making up the symptoms, or that they're actually doing harm, like poisoning their kid in some circumstances, or just over medicalizing, doing everything that the doctors are telling them, but somewhere along the line they get caught by the system and are told that they're hurting their child, and they risk losing their child. So it's a complicated story about the failures of our medical system and also child protective system.
Yeah, this EDS seems to be for now pretty rare, and only because it hasn't really been studied that much. It feels like what in the last few years maybe there's been a deep dive in terms of how to diagnose and gene therapy, or not gene therapy, but looking at genes and detecting the disease. But I want to know how did you connect? How did you get connected to the story and the families?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll start though. I want to just respond to the rare disease aspect. Um, Often we kind of like, if we don't know much about it, and like you said, there's not definitive tests, we just sort of like put it in the rare disease bucket, and people don't pay much attention to it because they just think it's rare. In reality, this is not a rare disease at all. It's estimated to be about 1 in 500, which is not rare. You're going to start to see cases of this, I think, more and more, and you probably might see it in friends. I have like people who've worked on the film, people I know that all of a sudden they're getting diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I think I think this is about to change. There's many celebrities who have it: Lena Dunham, Sia, Billie Eilish, Selma
Hmm.
Blair. So many people are starting to come out and share their stories. Uh, Now, I also want to make it clear that this is, while we're looking at Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, this is something that happens with all or most complicated, complex, and invisible illnesses that we might not have a definitive test for. Um, and so let's see. So how did I get involved? I'm fascinated by this kind of thing where there's not, there's nuance, there's gray area, there's like things don't seem definitive, um, um, and yet people are suffering. So I did a film in 2008 called Under Our Skin. It's about the Lyme disease epidemic, and it really um, shined a light on that controversy in a way that hadn't been done before. It got a lot of attention, and there's similar aspects to this the medical gaslighting, not taking it seriously. Um, Someone who was familiar with that film came to me. Uh, she's the co-producer of the film. Her name is Donna Sullivan, and her whole family has been affected by Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and asked me to make a film. So it's been seven plus years in the making. It's been a long road, um, and I hope that the film does shed light on this important story and the things and the way that um, the issue and the people involved really are falling through the cracks and not getting the help that they need.
Mhm. Like anybody I know has had problems with the medical system, problems getting a doctor, problems getting an appointment, problems getting the help that they need. But having a disease that's hard to detect, it just, each story you think oh, it can't get worse, and then it does. So it's just such a frightening, it's a horror story, this illness, and what's happening to all of these people. And as a documentarian, you're going through these struggles and these losses with these families. So can you talk about just sort of the emotional toll that it takes?
Yeah,
You spent 7 years, you
yeah,
said, in this
yeah.
world.
Well, I think you're touching upon something really important here, is that we spend a lot of time with our subjects, with our film subjects. And that's kind of so we know something. We become experts. And in many cases, we know more than the so-called experts, than the physicians, than the judges that are evaluating child protective cases. Uh, and so it was it was really, really difficult because these kids uh, were being accused of, many of them were being accused of faking it, and parents were being accused of harming their kids. Now, the problem is the system is not set up for complicated cases. That's sort of at the core of this. Um, it's cookie cutter medicine, 15 minutes in a doctor's office. So it's very specialized, and with an illness like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that affects all the different parts of the body, you need someone to connect the dots, and nobody's connecting the dots because that's not what cookie cutter medicine is. So that's a main problem. And then when it eventually gets to the legal side, child protective side, because what often happens is these kids land in a pediatric hospital, and there's a new profession called medical child abuse, and there are medical child abuse physicians whose job it is to find cases of it in the hospital system. And so mothers of kids with complicated conditions fit the profile of a mother who is with Munchausen by proxy or who is committing medical child abuse. So they immediately come under suspicion. Um, so all along the way, you've got these systems that aren't capable of looking at complicated cases. And then when it gets to the judge doesn't have time, doesn't have doesn't have the bandwidth, doesn't have the resources to evaluate. And many parents actually do lose their kids because of this.
Yeah, it's the story after story, and I don't want to give too much away. It was just you're sitting there, as you said, you guys as filmmakers become kind of experts in what's going on, and I'm sitting there just as the viewer, like, I don't understand why this system isn't seeing what we're seeing, but I do understand why they're not because of the cookie cutter aspect. But yeah, it's rough. What's going on at Boston Children's Hospital? Can you talk about that part of the story?
Well, I don't
Is
have
it
my lawyers on the
I
on the,
know,
on the
or
Zoom calls.
as much as you can talk about it, Andrew, and not get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, you did notice that was sort of a fulcrum of some of these cases. Um, Boston Children's is one of the best, if not the premier children's hospital in the country. And it's often a sort of last resort for families with kids with complicated cases or
Hmm.
complicated conditions. So, they're They've gone everywhere else. Uh, and there have been several cases, some high profile, some not as high profile, where child abuse allegations have been made. So I don't know. I guess the point here, without going into the weeds of individual cases, is that even the best hospitals, even the best physicians aren't able, don't have the background, don't have the wherewithal, don't have the knowledge to evaluate these complicated cases. So it's really surprising. It's very surprising. Um, and yet it's happening kind of every day,
Hmm.
not just at Boston Children's, but all over the
Right.
country.
Yeah, even my mom spent a long time in the hospital, and people wouldn't come and check in on her, and I was asking and asking, can you please just, and they're like, we don't have enough people. I have 100 patients right now. And like the nurse finally was just like, this is the reality. And that's for, the everyday patients, not even the rare specialized needs.
Right. So anything that needs time
Yeah.
and special attention, it just falls through the cracks.
Mm-hmm. So that was what I wanted to lead into, was the legality of, you have some footage in the hospitals, and also can these doctors that have misdiagnosed, not believed these kids and these parents, could they watch this film? Could you send it to the hospitals and the doctors, and just, if it's too late to change these cases now, but for the future, so there could be some sort of positive change?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one reason that the film was made, obviously, to create change, so that patients and their families understand more, but also caregivers, and the medical system. So, one thing is that we need more education. I think you saw in the film that something that was shocking to me, and will be shocking to everybody else, is that Elvis Presley had EDS. Elvis Presley, and now that once we know that, it sort of makes sense. The way he could move his body because he had loose joints. He was in and out of hospitals. He was very sick. He was on pain medication, which ultimately was part of what did him in. So, it's happening. It's happening in plain sight. But because physicians are not adequately educated. So hopefully this will prompt more education about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and other more complicated and invisible illnesses. So that's the goal of the film, to make
Mm-hmm.
to make change. And hopefully these stories, the real sadness, I mean, the awfulness of the stories in themselves, can have a sort of like uh, some sort of bright light at the end of the dark tunnel, is that it's helping other people. And the people in the film are doing what they're doing, um, to help others so that they don't have to go through what they've gone through. Many of them have said that.
Were you able to connect a lot of the people that you were interviewing, or were they already like a little community? Because I loved seeing the interpersonal relationships between them too.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice that you picked up on that. It is a small community. I think when you go into these so-called rare disease communities, um, people do know of each other. It's sort of like an underground network, um, and there's a lot of support between them. So we were connected to to people who knew. Like, we didn't do the connecting. Connecting was already there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for shining a light on this, and we hope it gets seen by a lot of eyes, especially in the medical fields, in schools. Just across the board. This work is really important. So thank you, Andrew. Again, we're talking about the Slamdance documentary, Complicated, and congratulations on a really powerful film.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. You can find more information about this episode in our show notes.
If you're missing us, you can visit us at bitchtalkpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter and buy us a cup of coffee.
Did you know we're also on the radio? You can find us at bff.fm.
And lastly, rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All the cool bitches are doing it.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.fm podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.fm, best frequencies forever.